I didn't tell anyone I was leaving, not even her. I packed my bag the night before quietly, slowly, like I was preparing for surgery. My hands trembled when I zipped it shut. I left my house keys on the hallway table beside the little ceramic owl she painted in kindergarten, and then I walked out. No lights on. No note. Nothing. I drove south through 2 states, 12 hours and 1,000 thoughts I couldn't outrun. Every time I stopped for gas or sat behind a red light, I wondered if this was crazy. If I'd finally tipped into the kind of madness no one warns mothers about. But I kept going. Something in me wouldn't let me turn back. She'd always talked about Florida, said she loved the sunshine, the ocean air. That's why she moved down there after grad school, said she needed space, new beginnings. I believed her. Or maybe I just didn't want to admit what I knew deep down, that she wanted space from me. I pulled into her driveway just past sunset. Her porch light was off. The lawn hadn't been mowed in weeks. I thought maybe she wasn't home. Maybe she was at work or the store. Maybe she'd scream when she saw me or hug me and cry. I didn't care. I just needed to see her. I knocked once, then twice. I leaned my ear to the door. Nothing. That's when I saw it. A note taped crookedly to the glass window on the front door, written in her handwriting with a little heart drawn at the end, like she used to when she was 16. On honeymoon back in 2 weeks. And just like that, the world fell silent. Let me know where you're listening from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel, and if this story speaks to you, share your thoughts below. Don't skip, because what happens at the end will surprise you more than the betrayal itself. I stepped back, stared at the note like it might vanish if I blinked enough times. Honeymoon. She hadn't even told me she got married. The tears didn't come right away. What I felt first was hollow, like someone had scooped my insides out and left me blinking and useless in the Florida heat. I sat down on the porch swing, the same one she FaceTimed me from 6 months ago. She told me she was redecorating. She spun the camera around to show me the potted succulents and the new doormat with their little dog's names stitched in white. But she never mentioned a wedding, never said a word about a man. Not once. I tried to call her, but it went straight to voicemail. Same with the next 4 tries. I left no messages. What could I say? Hi, it's your mother, the one you didn't invite to your wedding. Surprise, I'm on your porch. That night, I didn't go to a hotel. I slept in my car just down the street. I watched the house from a safe distance, hoping maybe the note was a joke, that she'd drive up at midnight with a bag of takeout and that crooked smile she had as a girl. Gotcha, she'd say. But no one came. By morning, the note was still there, the blinds still closed, the world unchanged. So I did what I always do when I don't know what to do. I sat with it. I sat and stared and remembered. The wedding she never had. The man she never told me about. The words she never gave me the chance to hear. And slowly, piece by piece, everything else started coming back. The way she'd stopped answering my calls unless I left a voicemail first. The way she canceled our last 2 holidays. The way she asked for money last spring, not much, just enough to feel small. Said she'd pay me back. Never did. And suddenly I knew. This wasn't new. It had been happening for a long time. I just refused to see it. I found a cheap motel by the highway, paid cash, checked in and turned the air all the way up until my skin ached from the cold. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my phone. Her last text was from 5 days ago. Just one word: busy. I didn't reply. I didn't know she was planning a wedding. I didn't know she was erasing me. The next morning, I drove back to her house. I walked around the back slowly like I didn't belong there anymore. There were empty wine bottles in the recycling, a pair of men's boots by the back door. I noticed new patio furniture, a small fire pit, 2 chairs, always 2. I looked through the sliding glass door. Their living room was spotless. New curtains, a dog bed in the corner, a silver-framed wedding photo on the mantel. There she was, in white, in his arms, laughing, and I was nowhere in it. I stood there outside my daughter's house, heart-thudding, breath short, watching a life that had no space for me anymore. Not even on the edges. I should have left, should have turned around and driven home. But I didn't. I did something else. I opened the side gate, walked through her garden, took a single photo of the wedding picture through the glass. Then I left the same way I came. And something inside me, something that had been buried deep and quiet for years, started to wake up. Back when she was little, I used to tell her she was made of starlight. Every night after her bath, I'd wrap her up in one of those 2 big towels with the little bare ears on the hood, and I'd sit her on the bed and say it like a promise. "You're made of starlight, Sophie. That's why you shine so bright." She'd giggle, cheeks all flushed from the warm water, and say, "What are you made of, Mommy?" And I'd say, "Clay and coffee, sweetheart." Clay and coffee. It was just the 2 of us after her father died. She was 6 months old. He'd had a heart attack in the garage holding a bag of groceries. I found him when I came home from work, milk spilled on the cement, his keys still in his hand. The EMTs told me he was gone before he hit the ground. I don't remember much from those first few months after. I was a ghost going through the motions, feeding a baby and signing death certificates. But Sophie, she pulled me back. Every time she reached for me in the middle of the night, something in me rooted back into the earth. I didn't get to grieve the way other people do. I had diapers to change, bills to pay, formula to buy. So I grieved quietly. In the shower, in the car, sometimes in the supermarket aisle when I saw his favorite cereal. We moved in with my mother for a while, just until I could afford something small. I worked at a diner during the day and took inventory at a hardware store at night. My body was always sore, but I kept showing up. For Sophie, she never knew how poor we were. She thought thrift store toys were treasure hunts. She thought frozen dinners were a treat. I made everything seem like an adventure because I wanted her to feel rich in all the ways I couldn't afford. By the time she was 12, we were finally okay. I got promoted to shift manager. We rented a 2-bedroom house with a small backyard. I planted a rose bush out front. Sophie joined choir. She brought home drawings of me with giant eyes and lopsided smiles. Every teacher said the same thing. "She's such a bright girl, so kind, so curious." And I'd smile every time and say, "She's made of starlight." We were close. The kind of close where she'd crawl into bed with me on stormy nights, even when she was too big for it. She'd sit at the kitchen table doing her homework while I cooked. She'd ask me questions about life, about love, about what I believed in. I told her to be brave. I told her to love big. And I told her maybe too many times that I'd always be there. Always. Even when she started pushing away, I didn't take it personally. Teenagers pull away. That's their job. I just kept the porch light on. She left for college 2 states over. I remember standing in her empty room that first night crying into her old hoodie, her scent still on the fabric, It felt like grieving all over again, but this time I was proud. She called every Sunday, told me about her classes, her friends. She never mentioned dating anyone. She said she didn't have time for that. I believed her. After graduation, she moved to Florida. I need sun, she told me, and space. I want to build something new. I helped her pack, gave her my old set of measuring cups, tucked a note in between her socks that said, "Clay and Coffee loves you." She hugged me tight at the airport. "I'll call you every day," she promised. And for a while she did. Every morning I'd make my coffee and sit by the window waiting for her call. It became my ritual. But slowly, things changed. First, it was every other day. Then once a week. Then just text messages, quick updates, emojis instead of words. "I'm fine, just swamped." "Sorry, Mom, crazy week." "Love you, I didn't want to smother her. I told myself she was busy, young, building her own life. That's what I raised her to do, right? To shine. But still it hurt. There's a quiet kind of heartbreak when someone fades from you without cruelty. When there's no big fight, no slammed doors. Just silence. Where warmth used to be. I didn't want to seem needy. So I never asked the big questions, never asked who she was spending her nights with, never asked why she stopped inviting me down, never asked why I hadn't met any of her friends in over a year. I just kept showing up, kept mailing her birthday cards with gas money tucked inside, kept telling people how proud I was, because I was proud, but I was also tired. So tired of pretending that distance didn't feel like abandonment. The last time we spoke on the phone was 3 months ago. She sounded distracted, tired, like she was waiting for me to finish. I told her I missed her. She said, "No, Mom, but I'm okay." Then before I could respond, she said, "I've got to go. Love you." And that was it. 3 months later, I'm standing outside her house, staring at a wedding photo I wasn't invited to. She had the whole ceremony, the white dress, the smiles, the cake, and not one word to her mother. Not a call. Not a card. Not a hint. I thought back to the time she broke her arm when she was 9. I drove her to the hospital in the middle of the night, still in my pajamas, holding her hand while she screamed. She kept looking at me even when the doctor told her to stay still. "Just look at me," I told her. I won't let go, and now she'd gone and done the biggest thing in her life. And let go of me entirely. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the secrecy or the ease with which she erased me, but I wasn't broken. Not yet. Not this time. That night in the motel, I made a list. Every small moment that had felt off over the past year. The money, the missing conversations, the sudden new car she told me she'd won in a raffle. The cracks weren't new. I'd just been too blind to see them. But I see them now, and the more I looked, the more I realized I wasn't just forgotten. I'd been pushed out, intentionally. It started with small things. Things you could excuse if you really wanted to. A missed birthday call. A forgotten appointment. A "sorry, Mom, I thought I sent that check last week," when she hadn't. I wanted to believe it was life. Just life. Moving fast and fraying the edges. I told myself not to be dramatic, that she loved me, that we were just in that weird stage when the child is grown and the parent hasn't figured out how to let go without disappearing. But something kept tugging, a voice inside me whispering louder every time she brushed me off. The first time I knew something wasn't right was last Christmas. I'd wrapped her gifts like always carefully, personally. One was a handmade recipe book I'd been building for months, filled with our family dishes and notes in the margins. She opened it, smiled politely, and set it aside like a pamphlet from the doctor's office. Then she gave me her gift. A Visa gift card, still in the envelope from the store. No note, no hug, just a transaction. "I figured you could get yourself something nice," she said, already looking at her phone. And I smiled. Because I was trained to. Because mothers know how to swallow pain in front of their children. But in that moment, something shifted. A fracture. Later that night, she went upstairs early, said she was tired, but I could hear her voice through the wall laughing on the phone. I walked into the kitchen to clean up. That's when I noticed the opened bottle of wine, 2 glasses drying in the rack. She wasn't alone. There was a man upstairs, and she hadn't said a word about him. I left early the next morning, made up a story about not wanting to drive in bad weather. She barely looked up from her coffee. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping me upright. She hadn't told me she was seeing someone, but someone had been in her bed, in her home, while I was sleeping in the guest room downstairs, like I was just background noise. The next few months only got worse. She stopped answering my calls. Texts came in late, short, generic. 1-word replies. Fine. Busy. Later. I knew something had changed, but I didn't have the proof. Then came the money. It started with a call in March. She sounded panicked. "Mom, can I ask you for something? Just a little help." Of course I said yes. She asked for $3,000, said it was a sudden expense. Car repairs, a security deposit, said she'd pay me back by June. I wired it the next day. Didn't even ask questions. That's what mothers do, right? But by July, I still hadn't heard anything. No thank you. No check in the mail. When I finally brought it up gently, because you always have to be gentle with Sophie, she laughed and said, "Oh God, did I not pay you back? I thought I did." "Sorry, I'll take care of it." But she didn't. And I didn't push. I just started watching, taking mental notes. And then something happened that finally shattered the illusion. It was a Tuesday morning in August. I'd gone to my bank to get a cashier's check to pay off the last bit of my roof repairs. The teller pulled up my accounts and looked confused. "Are you sure you didn't withdraw $5,000 last month?" she asked. I blinked. I've never withdrawn that much in my life. She double-checked. It was transferred to a joint account ending in 2289. "Do you have anyone authorized on your profile?" My throat went dry. I didn't. Or at least I didn't think I did. We called in the manager. They brought up the authorization form. It had my signature, but it wasn't mine. It was shaky. Rushed. Almost a perfect copy, but not quite. My hands went cold. I knew that number. 2289. It was the last 4 digits of Sophie's first apartment. I stared at the paper, heart pounding, ears ringing as the truth settled like dust on a casket. She forged my signature. She took my money, and she knew I'd never question it. The woman I raised to be strong had learned how to be cruel. I didn't say anything for weeks. I didn't confront her, didn't accuse her, didn't even let her know I found out. Instead, I started printing every account, every statement, every email. I bought a file box from the drugstore and labeled it House. Inside, I sorted everything by date. I started paying for everything in cash again. Locked my credit, changed my passwords. I even went back and checked my will. That's when I saw it. A name had been added under power of attorney. Her name. Dated last fall. Again. Not my signature. I sat in my kitchen that night for hours shaking, not from fear, from fury, from disbelief. She had planned this, piece by piece, and God help me, I had handed her every tool she needed, all because I trusted her, all because I loved her. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just sat there staring at the file box, repeating the same sentence to myself. You're made of starlight. I'm made of clay. And maybe that was the problem. I made her too strong, too smart, too good at pretending. I looked around my house, and started to feel like a guest in my own life. That's when I knew I needed to go to Florida. Not to confront her. Not yet. Just to see what else I didn't know. To stand in the sun and look her life in the face. And maybe figure out if I still had a place in it at all. I didn't tell her I knew. Not when she called the following week acting like everything was fine. She only called because I hadn't answered her last text. I let it sit unread for 3 days. That's the only way I get her to call now, by withholding. Hey, just checking in. Everything okay? Her voice was syrupy, cheerful, almost too sweet. The kind of sweet people use when they're hiding something behind their back. I kept my tone level. Fine, just been tired. Oh no, are you feeling sick again? No more than usual. She let out a nervous laugh. You know, you really should consider that senior living complex we talked about. The one in Winter Pines, they've got great reviews. That was the 3rd time she brought it up in the last 2 months, like she was planting seeds. I didn't bite. I like my home, I said slow and steady. The air smells like me. She was quiet for a moment. Then, okay, just think about it. I worry about you. You know, that was rich. I looked at the file box across the room, my stolen money, my forged signature, her silence. She didn't worry about me. She worried about control. That night, I sat by my kitchen window with a notebook in my lap and wrote down everything she'd said in that call. Not because I needed the details, but because I needed to see the pattern. There was always a pattern. A suggestion masked as concern. A lie softened by affection. A withdrawal of warmth every time I didn't comply. It was like living with a spider. You don't notice the web until it's across your face. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. So I stopped talking as much. Stopped explaining myself. Stopped offering anything she didn't directly ask for. I started paying attention to what she didn't say, like how she never mentioned her job anymore, or why she always changed the subject when I asked about her dog's vet appointments. She was pulling away but still trying to keep her hand in my pocket. And me, I stopped fighting, at least on the surface. I said yes more. I nodded when she made suggestion. I laughed when she joked about how forgetful you're getting, Mom. Let her believe I was slipping, that I was too tired to keep up, because it's easier to study someone when they don't think you're looking. I'd walk through the house at night and notice the details she'd never asked about. Family photos gone from her shelves. Old gifts I gave her tossed in drawers. Voicemails unplayed. Bank statements unopened. She wasn't just removing me emotionally, she was erasing me logistically. And I'd let her get that far because I couldn't bear to believe she was capable of it. But when belief cracks, vision sharpens. I started reading between the lines, like the time she told me she'd gotten a promotion and would be traveling more for work. Except her social media showed her at home. at brunch, at wine bars, with him. The man I hadn't even met yet. Not officially. The man whose boots I saw by her back door. The man who by now I was almost sure had helped her forge that paperwork. He was always in the background of photos, blurred but present. An arm around her waist, a hand holding hers, reflections in windows, the ghost she didn't name. I started collecting those too. Screenshots, timelines. I printed them, filed them. This wasn't paranoia. This was a case. And the more I gathered, the quieter I became. Because quiet is where power waits. There was a time when I'd call her crying, when I'd beg for her attention, when I'd ask, did I do something wrong? But now I watched, and what I saw was a daughter I didn't recognize anymore. A woman who'd learned to see me not as a mother, but as a resource. I knew what was coming next. The real push. She'd start planting stories about my memory slipping. She'd mention things I supposedly forgot. She'd suggest more paperwork just in case. She'd say it all with a smile. And she'd think I was too far gone to see it. But I wasn't gone. I was wide awake. I started going through my own things, sorting what was mine, what I wanted to protect, what I could let go of. I made duplicates of everything, my ID, my medical files, my passwords. I updated my will. Quietly. I revoked the fraudulent power of attorney and filed a report with the bank under the guise of confusion. I played the old woman, the sweet, tired mother, the clay, while I let her believe she was the starlight. But inside, I was building something. Not revenge. Not yet. Something cleaner, sharper, something she wouldn't see coming because she was too busy looking away. I started calling people I hadn't spoken to in years. Old friends, neighbors, my cousin Marla who works at the courthouse. I asked simple questions, innocent ones, but I logged every answer like it was gospel. I needed to understand what Sophie was preparing behind the scenes, because I had a feeling the wedding wasn't the end of her plan. It was the beginning. She was nesting, consolidating. She wanted control of me and everything I had before she started her new life. I wasn't angry. Not yet. That would come later. What I felt more than anything was clarity. A strange, cool calm that settled over me like snow. It let me think. Plan. Wait. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to confront her. I didn't need her to admit anything. Not yet. I just needed time. And I knew that soon, she'd make her biggest mistake. She'd underestimate me completely. I remember the exact moment I decided to stop reacting and start preparing. It wasn't a dramatic scene. No shouting. No doors slammed. It was a Thursday morning. I was folding towels. That's it. A normal, dull moment in a life I'd let become too small. I had just hung up with Sophie another short call where she asked if I'd considered downsizing again, and I said yes. She went quiet, surprised. That's when I knew. She didn't expect me to say yes. She expected a fight. A mother clinging to her little house, her little memories, her little life. She didn't realize yet that I was no longer fighting her. I was studying her, and I'd decided to play the long game. I started by agreeing to everything. Yes, Sophie, I'll think about assisted living. Yes, I'll scan those estate documents you sent. Yes, I'll come visit in the fall so we can talk in person. Yes became my favorite weapon, because every time I said it, she relaxed. She let her guard down. She thought she'd won. And people who think they've won get careless. The next day I called my lawyer. Not the family ones Sophie always suggested. I found a woman I used to waitress with 30 years ago now, running a small, sharp firm 2 towns over. Susan Reynolds. She listened. Didn't interrupt. When I finished explaining everything, every forged form, every unauthorized transaction, she didn't look shocked. She looked disappointed. These kinds of things happen more often than you'd believe, she said. The hard part is proving intent. Then I'll get proof I said steady as ever. She slid a yellow legal pad across the desk. Start here. That night I stayed up until 2 a.m., going through every email, every text, every old file. I compiled it all. Dates, screenshots, audio notes. I even printed out the photos from Sophie's honeymoon, the ones she never sent me. She was standing next to him barefoot on the beach holding a bouquet. The caption, "Best day of my life." No mention of me, no mother in the crowd. Just her, and him, and the fantasy they built. I stared at the photo, and I knew he was involved. He didn't just marry my daughter, he was helping her dismantle me. So I did something I'd never done before. I looked him up. His name was Thomas Kerrigan. Not the most memorable name, but his face stuck with you smug, confident, a little too smooth. I found his LinkedIn, his Facebook. Even an old blog from years ago about flipping properties. Buried in the comments was a name I hadn't heard in decades. My husband's. David M. Same last name. Same company. Different lifetime. I clicked the thread, and there it was. A project from 1993. Kerrigan Construction. David listed as a subcontractor, a lawsuit over permits, fraud allegations, no criminal charges, just rumors, quiet settlements. David never told me, or maybe he did and I forgot, but the connection made my stomach twist, because now this same man was in my daughter's house, in her bed, helping her rewrite my life. I printed everything and added it to the file box, now labeled in bold Florida. The next step was riskier. I needed to make them feel safe enough to stop hiding. So I called Sophie. I've been thinking I said sweet and slow the way she preferred me. Maybe I do need to come down. Oh, she said, caught off guard. Really? I think I'd like to look at that complex you mentioned. Winter Pines. Maybe tour it. Get a feel. She got quiet. Then she said, That's great, Mom. Really? Her tone shifted. Careful? Like she didn't want to sound too eager. I'll have Thomas email you the tour schedule, she added, and there it was. Thomas. She said his name like it had always belonged in our conversations, like he wasn't the ghost behind the curtain. I didn't let the silence stretch. I'd like to surprise you, I said. Don't worry about picking me up. I'll rent a car. I want to see what traffic's like down there anyway. Oh, sure, she said. Okay. That's when I knew she hadn't planned on seeing me for months. If ever. She'd boxed me out of her life entirely, and the trip, the one I took in silence without telling her, that wasn't a whim. That was the test. I needed to see the lie up close, to breathe it, to walk around in it, to know with full certainty that she had buried me long before the honeymoon, so I waited 3 weeks. I watched her social media like a hawk. They posted about a new real estate investment. Duplex under contract, she wrote with little house emojis. I looked up the parcel number. Guess who owned the title me? They had listed my name as a co-signer without ever speaking to me. And now they were planning to sell it. Flip it, like I was just another old property they'd inherited. I didn't call her. I called Susan. I want to move everything out of my name. Everything I still can. And I want it done fast. We started the paperwork that afternoon, revoked permissions, removed beneficiaries, transferred funds, created a new trust. We called it Starlight Holding because sometimes irony is sweeter than rage. By the time I got back from Florida, I had quietly taken my life back. But I didn't tell Sophie. Not yet. Let her think I was still old, still soft, still sleeping under the wool blanket of her manipulation. I let her believe it, because what I had planned next was going to need that silence. And I needed her to keep underestimating me just a little longer. They say you can tell when a lie starts to rot. It doesn't come all at once. Not like in the movies where there's a grand reveal or someone walks in at the wrong time. No real lies. They leak. They crack. They start to smell faintly wrong like milk turned a day past the date. You could still drink it, but you shouldn't. I started noticing the smell around Sophie and Thomas the second time I came down to Florida. By then, I had everything moved into the trust. My will was updated. My medical directive stripped her name. The bank accounts were split clean and quiet. I even had an attorney lined up locally just in case they tried anything in state. But I didn't tell them any of it. I just knocked on her door one humid Tuesday afternoon, suitcase in hand, smile fixed. She blinked when she opened the door. "Mom." "Surprise," I said. She looked back inside the house like she needed to ask permission. Then she stepped aside. Thomas was standing by the kitchen island. He didn't smile, but he nodded. I looked around. The wedding photo had been moved to the hallway. There was a second dog, now a puppy. I hadn't heard anything about it. The house looked expensive, clean, cold. Like it had been staged, not lived in. I walked inside. Heart steady, face unreadable. "How long are you staying?" Thomas asked. "Just a few days," I said. "Don't worry, I won't be in the way." Sophie laughed nervously. "You're never in the way, Mom." I smiled and said nothing. And that silence was louder than any response. We sat on the back porch later that evening. Sophie poured me a glass of wine I didn't ask for and asked about the house, the weather, my knee pain. Not once did she mention the wedding. Not once did she say sorry. I watched her closely. Her hands fidgeted. She kept checking her phone. Her smile was too fixed like a mask that didn't fit quite right anymore. And Thomas? He didn't say much at all. Just sat there watching me like a man trying to solve a riddle in real time. That's when I realized he knew. He knew I was doing something. He just didn't know what. Later that night, I went to the guest room, the one they always kept ready for me, even though I'd never been invited back since that Christmas. I opened the nightstand. Inside was a folder labeled Winter Pines Intake. Dorothy M. I didn't touch it. I didn't have to. Just seeing it there told me what I needed to know. They were planning something. They wanted to make a move soon, and they thought they still had time. The next morning over coffee, Sophie brought it up casually. "So, I was thinking we could drive by Winter Pines today, just to look." I sipped my drink. "Sure." She blinked surprised. "Really?" "Might as well," I said. "No harm in looking." We went. I let her lead. She walked me through the lobby like a real estate agent showing off a condo. They have game nights, movie nights. There's even a shuttle to the beach. The woman at the desk handed me a brochure and said, "Your daughter's been wonderful to work with. She really wants the best for you." I smiled, folded the brochure, and slipped it into my purse. Didn't say a word. Sophie looked relieved on the drive home, like a weight had shifted. I let her believe it. That night I asked for an early dinner, said I was tired. She went to bed around 10. Thomas stayed up watching something on his tablet. At midnight, I walked downstairs barefoot, holding my phone to my chest like a relic. Thomas looked up. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Not really." He nodded. We sat in silence for a while. Then I said, "How long have you known Sophie?" He looked surprised by the question. "Few years. We worked together. Then reconnected." "You knew my husband." It wasn't a question. He froze. Yeah, briefly. A long time ago. You two were involved in that property deal back in '93. He said nothing. I let the silence stretch until it folded in on itself. "I looked you up," I said, finally. "I always do that with strangers in my daughter's life." He smiled tightly. "I'm not a stranger anymore." "No," I said. "You're not." I stood up, stretched, and turned to go. Just before I reached the stairs, I said, "You might want to check your filing cabinet. You left some old forms open." Then I went to bed. He didn't respond. The next morning, Sophie was different, tense. She smiled too wide. Overcompensating. I could feel the shift. Something passed between them the night before, and I wasn't supposed to know. But I did. Every hour I spent in that house, I knew I was a step ahead, because the panic was starting to creep in. They didn't know what I'd done, only that something had changed. They started asking questions, subtle ones. Sophie asked how I'd been paying my bills, if I needed help with online banking. Thomas asked if I'd made any updates to my will. I gave them nothing, just vague nods and, "Oh, you know me, I still use checks." Let them believe I was slow, that I was slipping. It was the perfect disguise. On my last night there, Sophie handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Just something to look over?" "No pressure. We can talk more later." I opened it slowly. It was a new power of attorney form, this time typed clean. Legible, perfect, signed by me, dated 3 days ago. Only, I hadn't signed it. Not once. Not anywhere. They forged it again. Brazen, confident, because they thought I was too far gone to notice. I looked up at her, smiled. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'll read it on the plane." She smiled back. Believed me. And in that moment, I knew. The downfall had begun. They were slipping, getting sloppy, and all I had to do was wait for them to fall into their own trap. When the truth finally came out, there was no screaming, no tears, no plates crashing. Just a hallway. 3 people. And the sound of something quiet snapping in half. It happened back home, my home, about a month after I left Florida. The leaves had started to turn, and the air carried that familiar chill that made the floorboards creak under your steps. I liked that sound. Reminded me I was still here, still solid. I hadn't spoken to Sophie since I got back. She'd texted twice, just check-ins, nothing real. I didn't answer. Not because I was punishing her, because I was preparing. I needed to be calm when it happened. I needed to look her in the eye and know that I wasn't reaching for anything anymore. No approval, no apology, just clarity. I waited until she couldn't ignore me. That came when the lawyer for the trust, Susan, sent Sophie and Thomas an official notice the house they'd been using as collateral for their duplex investment wasn't available anymore. Because it was no longer in my name. It belonged to Starlight Holding, and Starlight had nothing to do with them. I knew the moment they received it because Sophie called me 6 times in 1 hour. Then she showed up. No warning, just a knock. I opened the door slowly, heart still but pounding in my chest like something bracing for a final quake. She stood there face pale, dressed too neatly like she wanted to look in control. Thomas was behind her hands, in his pockets, jaw clenched. I stepped aside without a word. They walked in like strangers, like people unsure of how to move through someone else's story. We stood in the front hallway framed by silence. She spoke first. "Why didn't you tell me you were selling the house?" Her voice cracked around the edges. Not with sadness, with panic. I didn't answer. I just looked at her full and steady for the first time in a long time. So she tried again. "Mom? What is this? What are you doing?" "You mean my house," I said soft. "My money. My life." Her mouth opened then closed. "I don't understand," she said. Thomas stepped forward. "You revoked power of attorney." I nodded. He waited for more. I gave him nothing. That wasn't a smart move, he said, and that was the moment. Not the lie, not the theft, not even the wedding she never told me about. That. The moment he forgot I wasn't a client, or a business partner, or someone waiting to be handled. I was her mother, and I was done being afraid of losing her, so I stepped closer, slowly, my voice steady. "Thomas, I said, I know what you are." He didn't move. "I know about the 93 permit scam, the subcontractor shuffle, the offshore accounts. And I know without question that you chose my daughter, not because you loved her, but because you saw opportunity." He looked at Sophie. She didn't look surprised. "Just tired." "Sophie, I said you let him do this to me." Her chin trembled. "You forged my name," I said louder now. "You took my money. You listed my property as yours. And you smiled in my face while you were doing it." "I thought it was just temporary," she whispered. You were going to move me into a place that would keep me quiet." The hallway rang with silence again. "You were going to sell my house, my things, my name." I didn't mean. "You mean all of it," I said. And then softer. "The part that hurts is that you didn't even need to. I would have helped you. I would have given you everything. You didn't have to lie." Her eyes welled up then, but I wasn't reaching anymore. I wasn't waiting for the apology. I wasn't going to cry just because she finally looked like she might. "You weren't just trying to survive," I said. "You were trying to erase me." Thomas stepped forward again. "You don't have proof of anything. None of what you're saying will hold in court." I looked at him like he was a child. "Susan has the documents. The bank has the flagged transactions. The notary you used in Tampa. She already gave a statement." "You want court," I said. "I beg you to try me in court." Sophie finally looked at me then. Really looked. And I saw it in her eyes the moment it all cracked. She knew I had her. There was no comeback. No more pretending I didn't understand what was happening. No more playing the sweet aging mother. "I didn't know what else to do," she said. "You could have come home," I replied. "You could have told me the truth." She shook her head. "I didn't want to be your daughter anymore. I wanted to be someone new." And that was it. There it was. The root. The truth that stung deeper than all the paperwork and plans. She didn't just want my money. She wanted distance from who she used to be, from me, from our history, and Thomas. He was just a means to that end. I looked at her and nodded, not in approval, in understanding. Then I stepped aside. "The door's right there," I said. "You're free to go." She stood frozen for a second, then walked out. Thomas followed without a word. They didn't look back. They didn't ask for forgiveness. They didn't plead or threaten. They just left. The wind caught the front door and shut it behind them with a soft click. I stood in the hallway for a while, hand still on the doorknob, wondering if I'd feel relief. I didn't. Not yet. Just stillness. But inside that stillness, something opened. Something hollow emptied out. And in its place was something better, something I hadn't felt in years. Control. Not over them, over myself. And that was the first time in a long time that I felt truly safe. The house felt unfamiliar after they left. Quiet in a way that wasn't peaceful. Not yet. It was the kind of silence that follows a storm, branches, broken air still thick. Nothing moving, not even the birds. I sat down at the kitchen table and let the weight of it all settle into my bones. I'd pictured this moment 1,000 times. I thought I'd feel victorious, vindicated, maybe even smug. But instead I just felt old, tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix, because when the truth comes out, it doesn't set you free. It just shows you how much you were carrying, for how long. I made tea not because I wanted it, but because it gave my hands something to do. The kettle took forever. I watched it like it owed me answers. Susan called that evening. She already knew. Sophie had tried to contact her within an hour of leaving my house. She wanted to know if you had legal grounds to rescind the trust, she said. I told her yes, and that if she pushed it, we'd be pressing charges. What did she say to that? She hung up. That was enough for me. I didn't want to ruin her. I just wanted her out of the parts of my life she'd already hollowed. Susan paused before hanging up. You okay? No, I said honestly, but I will be. That night I went to bed early. I left the hallway light on, not because I was scared, but because for the first time in a long time, I knew no one else was coming in. No one was going to walk through that door with a plan tucked into a folder. No one was going to ask me for access. No one was going to offer help with an edge of control. Just me. And the quiet. The days that followed were strange. People say the worst part of betrayal is the moment you find out. They're wrong. The worst part is what comes after. When the adrenaline wears off. When the rage cools. When there's no longer anything to do. Just the work of moving forward. That's the part no one teaches you. What it means to be truly alone with what you know. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not friends. Not the neighbor who always waved when I brought the trash out. Not the book club ladies who'd call if I missed more than 2 Thursdays. It wasn't shame. It was exhaustion. How do you explain that your daughter tried to steal your life and barely looked guilty doing it? How do you say, she married a man who knew my husband before he died, a man with a history, a man who saw me as a stepping stone? How do you say she was never planning to tell me she got married, or that she forged my signature, or that she tried to erase me so she wouldn't have to carry the weight of where she came from? You don't. You sit with it. Let it shape itself into something quieter. something manageable, and you keep going. I started by doing small thing. I went through every drawer in the house and made a pile of everything I didn't need. Old receipts, duplicate chargers, keys to nowhere. I donated clothes that didn't fit anymore, cookware I never used, books I wasn't going to read again. I wanted my home to feel like mine again, not like a storage unit someone else was waiting to empty. Then I updated my photo frames, took out the ones with Sophie and Thomas, replaced them with snapshots of my garden in full bloom, the lake near my childhood home, a candid from the day I got my nursing license, proof that I had a life before her, proof I could have one after. One afternoon, I went out to the back porch and sat in the same chair I used to rock her to sleep in 25 years ago. The wood had splintered in places, but it still held me. I remembered the way her head used to rest against my chest, how she'd hum when she was between dreaming and waking, how I used to think that being her mother was the most sacred thing I'd ever be. I still believe that, even now. But I've learned something else. Being her mother does not mean being her victim. That distinction is everything. The mail came that afternoon. I almost didn't check it, but something nudged me. There was a single envelope. No return address. Just my name in her handwriting. Inside was a letter. 3 paragraphs. No apology. Just a soft rewrite of the truth. She said she felt overwhelmed, that Thomas had pushed for things too quickly, that she never meant to hurt me, that she hoped we could find a way back. There was no mention of the forged documents, no mention of the money, no ownership of what was taken, just vague language. Foggy regret. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and put it in the back of my file box under a new label, What Was Left. Because that's what this all was now, a collection of what remained after the fire, not rubble, just pieces. I made dinner that night and set the table for one. It didn't feel sad. It felt clean, honest. Later, I wrote a reply. Just 2 lines. I always wanted you to be free, but not like this. We don't go back, Sophie, only forward. I didn't mail it. I didn't need to. It wasn't for her. It was for me. The beginning of what comes next. Not revenge. Not rage. Just reality. And in reality, sometimes the people you raise walk away from who you are so they can become someone else. That doesn't make you worthless. It just makes you witness to their turning and a survivor of your own. The phone rang on a Thursday. I was out in the garden, knees in the dirt, pulling weeds like they were old secrets. My gloves were caked with soil, and the sun was in that late afternoon slant that made everything glow like it was forgiven. I didn't recognize the number. I almost didn't answer, but something in me, some stubborn, weathered instinct, told me to pick up. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was soft, controlled, like she'd rehearsed it a dozen times. "I didn't think you'd answer." I stood up, brushed the dirt from my knees, and looked out at the rose bush blooming near the fence. I didn't speak. Not yet. "I just wanted to hear your voice," she said. I still didn't speak, because I knew what this was. This wasn't about healing. This wasn't about closure. This was about control. She needed to feel me again. Needed to know if I was still on the line emotionally, not just technically. So I waited. Let the silence stretch. Then I said, "How's Florida?" She let out a breath like she'd been holding it for days. "It's been quiet," she said. "We're, reevaluating some things." I bet they were. Susan had followed up with their financial advisor. The notice of fraud was filed, and the bank had already flagged their investment activities. Thomas's name was under review. I didn't need to say any of that. Sophie already knew. She was just calling to test the temperature, see if the ground had cooled enough to step on. "We're thinking of moving," she added. I let that hang in the air. She waited for me to ask where. I didn't. Instead, I said I saw the honeymoon photos. Looked warm. A long pause. "I wanted to call you before we left," she said. "But you didn't. I thought it would be easier that way." For who? More silence. Then a whisper. For me. That at least was honest. I didn't fill the space after. I just let her sit in it. Let her taste the stillness that came after the damage. "I made mistakes," she said carefully. "But I don't think you understand how hard it's been." There it was. The turn. The quiet pivot from apology to explanation. From guilt to justification. "I gave up a lot to take care of you," she said. "I mean, for years." "No," I said firm now. "You don't get to rewrite that part." She went silent. "You didn't take care of me?" "Sophie," I said, "you took from me." "There's a difference." Her breath hitched. "I was scared," she said. "Thomas, he said we needed to plan for your future, that we had to be proactive. You forged my name. That was him. I didn't know." "Don't lie." I said sharp enough to cut the line in half. "You signed your name right next to his." She didn't speak. The silence on her end now wasn't tension, it was unraveling. "You could have asked me," I said softer. "You could have come to me. Told me you were scared. Told me you needed help." "I didn't want to need help," she said, "and so instead, you made me into a burden." The truth of it hung heavy between us, because she couldn't deny it. I heard her sniff. Then quietly, I thought if we controlled things, you'd be safer. Set up. Comfortable. "You mean gone," I said. "You thought if you tucked me away somewhere, you could start fresh without the weight of who raised you." "No, I'm not stupid, Sophie." I let the line settle. "I know the difference between love and guilt," I said, "and I won't take guilt dressed up like concern." "I don't know how to fix this," she whispered. "You can't." She cried then. Not loud, not messy, just quiet, desperate breathing. The kind that used to bring me running when she was 5 and afraid of thunder. But I didn't run this time. I stayed still. She needed to know what that felt like. "Are you going to press charges?" she asked finally. It was the real question. The reason for the call. I took a breath. "No." She let out something like relief. "But if you or Thomas touch one more document, speak to one more bank, make one more move with my name attached to it," I let my voice drop. "I won't stop next time." She said nothing. "I mean it, Sophie. You're not above consequence just because you share my blood." "I know. Do you?" A pause. "I do now." I looked out at the roses blooming brighter than I remembered. Maybe they'd always been that red. Maybe I just never looked close enough. "I never stopped loving you," she said. "I never stopped protecting myself," I answered. And somehow, that was the truest thing I'd said all year. There was nothing left after that. Just breathing. 2 women on either side of a fault line that used to be a home. "I should go," she said finally. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. "Take care of yourself," I said. "I'm sorry." "I believe you," I said. "But I'm still not coming back." And then I ended the call. No goodbye. Just the click of a line closing, and the relief of knowing that for once I had the final word. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and let the wind move through the trees like a whisper I didn't need to answer. The call with Sophie was still sitting in me, not hot, not fresh, just settled like dust on the bookshelf. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't replaying her words. I was just done. And that kind of peace doesn't come with fireworks. It's not triumphant. It's quiet. Like a room that was once full and now isn't, but you've stopped expecting footsteps down the hall. I stared out into the yard and thought about all the things that never got said. The quiet sacrifices, the birthdays spent alone, the Christmas gifts that got rewrapped when she canceled last minute, the way she used to kiss my cheek and say, "You're the strongest person I know, Mom." And how easily she forgot that. How quickly she convinced herself I was fragile, breakable, disposable. The next morning, I started cleaning out the freezer. I pulled everything out one item at a time. Frozen lasagna, homemade chicken stock in old yogurt containers, blueberries from the bush out back. But what stopped me cold, what made me sit down right there on the linoleum, was how empty it had become. The backup meals I'd prepped for myself, the things I always kept in there in case I had a rough week, were gone. All of them. Quietly removed. Used. Discarded. That's when I remembered. Sophie and Thomas had stayed at my house a few months earlier. I was in the hospital for a 3-day blood pressure monitor. She insisted on watching the house, said she didn't trust my locks. She never asked if she could take my food, never asked if she could rearrange my pantry. But when I got home, everything felt a little off. And now I knew why. They were practicing, testing how much they could remove without me noticing. The freezer was just the first draft. The plan to move me into assisted living. That was the final edit. I stood up, wiped my hands on my shirt, and said aloud to the empty kitchen, "Never again." That afternoon, I made a list. Not for groceries, not for chores, for people, the ones I still trusted. Not many, but enough. I called my cousin Marla and told her everything. She listened, really listened. Not with sympathy, but with respect. Then she said something I didn't expect. "You know you're allowed to talk about it now. The truth. You don't have to protect her image anymore." That hit me hard, because she was right. For years, I'd kept Sophie's reputation clean. To my friends, she was just busy. To the neighbors, she was thriving in Florida. To my book club, she sent the sweetest Mother's Day card. But it was all a cover. For a daughter who hadn't visited in 2 years. For a woman who'd taken tens of thousands of dollars without asking. For a newlywed who hadn't told her mother she got married. So I stopped covering. I started telling the truth. First to Marla, then to Doris from across the street, who always offered to bring in my mail, but never asked why I stopped smiling when I got it. Then to my lawyer, my doctor, even the woman at the pharmacy who'd seen Thomas pick up my prescription once. I didn't frame it with anger. I just told it plain. The silence, the lies, the papers she forged. It wasn't a cry for pity. It was documentation. Because I'd learned something powerful. When people know you've been betrayed, they stop assuming you were just forgotten. They start watching with you. That's how you stay safe. By shining light in every dark corner they tried to hide in. One afternoon, I walked into the personal library my late husband and I had built together. It hadn't changed much over the years. The same wooden shelves, the same armchair by the window. I used to read to Sophie there. Goodnight Moon, Anne of Green Gables, whatever she reached for, I'd raid. I pulled out one of the older books and slipped a small manila envelope behind it. Inside were 3 documents, a notarized affidavit of the forged signature, the trust paperwork for Starlight Holding, a copy of my current will. I labeled the envelope "in case." Then I slid the book back in place and closed the cabinet. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. Because people like Sophie and Thomas, they don't always leave quietly. Sometimes they circle back. Sometimes they smile a little too soon, offer kindness like bait. But I wasn't scared of them anymore. I knew where everything stood, and they knew now that I wasn't the mother they thought I was. Not the soft one, not the weak one, not the woman who'd sit still while they quietly sold her name. That evening I went out for a walk. The air was warm, golden. I passed the mailbox and saw nothing new. I stopped by the bakery and picked up a single croissant. Just one. Because I didn't need to buy in pairs anymore. When I got home, I made a fresh cup of coffee, sat on the porch, and watched the sky change color over the trees. I thought of Sophie, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't miss her. I missed who I thought she was. But that version of her, she was gone. Maybe she'd never been real. And now I was learning how to live without her. Not in grief, not in bitterness, but in something steadier, something clearer, freedom. I didn't hear from her for 3 weeks. Not a call, not a message, nothing forwarded in the mail, and I didn't expect to. That's the thing about confrontation. It doesn't always spark a change. Sometimes it just clears the smoke. And once the smoke is gone, you finally see what's really there. In this case, nothing. Just an empty field where a daughter used to stand. I spent those weeks quietly, almost carefully, like I was walking through the ruins of something sacred. I kept myself busy not because I needed the distraction, but because I needed the rhythm, the beat of a life that no longer revolved around waiting on her. I finally painted the guest room, the one she used to sleep in when she visited back when she still visited. I chose a soft taupe, something clean, calming. I took down the framed quote she gave me for Mother's Day years ago, "Home is where your mom is." I put it in the donation pile. I wasn't bitter. I just didn't want to keep hanging ghosts on my walls. The lawyer called again. Susan always sounded steady. Her voice made you feel like nothing could go too wrong with her watching your side. She said Thomas's business accounts were under audit now. Not because of me, though I had set things in motion, but because someone else had noticed inconsistencies. Funny how the truth eventually invites itself to the surface, even without a host. I thanked her, told her to let me know if anything new came up. But really, I had already closed the door on all of that. I wasn't waiting for justice anymore. I had mine. I had it the moment I said no, the moment I chose silence instead of explanation. And still there were traces. Her name on old greeting cards stuffed in drawers. A single earring of hers behind the bathroom sink. A tiny photograph of us on a beach when she was 7, sunburned and laughing, holding a pail of seashells. I didn't throw it away. I just moved it. Tucked it into a box labeled personal keep. Because not everything had to be burned. Some things could just be put away. One night near the end of September, I got a text. Just a single message. From her. It said, "He's gone." That was it. No name. No punctuation. I stared at it for a long time. Didn't answer. Didn't need to. I already knew. Thomas had disappeared. Not literally, no. He was still breathing, still walking around somewhere probably half a step ahead of his creditors. But he'd done what men like him always do when the cracks widened too far to jump. He ran, left her holding the bag, the debt, the shame, and now, maybe the truth. I didn't feel sorry for her. I didn't feel good about it either. I just felt unmoved. That's what happens when someone spends years thinning your soul, when they take from you with both hands and call it help. Eventually, they can't reach you anymore, even when they're drowning. She didn't follow up after the text. I don't know what she expected me to say. I told you so. Come home I wasn't offering either. I was still living in the house they thought they'd sell, still drinking from the mug she once tried to pack in a moving box when she thought I wasn't looking, still sleeping in my bed alone but unbothered, still breathing, and still me. And slowly, I started noticing things were growing again. The back garden, neglected for 2 summers, suddenly sprouted more than it had in years. My hydrangeas came in blue, not wilted. The grass didn't die in the bald patches by the swing. Even the old maple out front, sick for seasons, started dropping red gold leaves like it had something to say. I took it as a sign, not of healing, but of returning. Returning to myself, to my name, to my home. No one else's fingerprints on the cabinets, no one else's plans tucked into drawers. One morning I went to the local community center. There was a flyer posted on the corkboard near the entrance, volunteers needed. Free tutoring for adult education. I took it down, folded it into my coat pocket, and signed up the next day. I didn't do it to be noble. I did it because it felt good to help people without the threat of being erased. These students didn't want to manipulate me. They just wanted to learn. And for the first time in a long time, I gave myself to people who saw me. Not as a resource, not as a stepping stone, but as a woman. A woman with stories. A woman who'd walked through fire without smoke on her clothes. At one of the sessions, a man named Jorge, maybe 40, asked me if I had children. I paused, then said I did. He nodded like he understood. Didn't pry. And for once, I didn't feel like I owed him the rest of the story. Because sometimes the story ends quietly. Not with slamming doors, but with drawers being closed. Letters unanswered. Freezers restocked. I came home that night and made dinner for one. Steak, mashed potatoes, green beans. I set the table, poured a glass of wine, lit a candle, and ate slowly like the world wasn't running away from me anymore. Because it wasn't. They had left, but I had stayed. And in staying, I had claimed what they never truly saw. That I wasn't just the woman they thought they could silence. I was the one who remembered. Everything. And that memory, that was mine to keep. It's strange what you remember. Not the big things, not always. The wedding she never invited me to. That hurts, yes, but it doesn't come back to me in flashes. What returns are the smaller moments, her handwriting in the margins of a recipe book, the sound of her footsteps coming down the stairs when she was 16 and still needed me but didn't know how to say it. The way she used to rest her chin on my shoulder while I stirred soup at the stove. Those are the things that haunt you, not because they were perfect, but because they were real. And real things are what you mourn the most. I kept the house quiet in those weeks that followed. No TV, no music, Just the ticking of the old clock in the hall and the wind through the windows. Some nights I'd walk from room to room, just touching the walls, reminding myself I was still here, that this was still mine. I'd light a candle in the library, sit in the armchair, and read without really reading. Sometimes I'd open the file box, the one labeled What Was Left, and I'd run my fingers over the envelopes. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't waiting for anything to be made right. What was broken would stay broken. That was the price. But there was something else I hadn't expected. A sort of calm, not peace. Peace is what you feel when a wound heals. This was something deeper, something steadier. Finality. I started journaling again, nothing flowery, nothing poetic, just the facts of each day. Went to market, bought honey, saw that stray tabby again. Sometimes I'd find my words drifting toward Sophie, not in longing, but in reckoning. I wrote a line one morning that stayed with me. She didn't lose me. She let me go. And once I wrote that, something opened up in me. Because the truth was, I kept thinking she'd come back, even after everything. That some apology would arrive real this time. That she'd show up without Thomas, without explanations, just her bare-faced honest. But she didn't. And I don't think she will. A few days ago, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Postmarked from a new city. Inside was a folded piece of printer paper. Plain. No salutation. Just one sentence. I'm sorry for the kind of daughter I became. It wasn't signed, but I knew her handwriting. It was cleaner now, more controlled, like she'd practiced it on envelopes before writing this one. I read it once. Then I folded it and placed it not in the file box, but inside the back cover of my journal. Because that's where it belongs. A piece of the truth, but not the whole story. The whole story is this: me still living, still breathing, still in the house they thought they could take, still sleeping under the roof that carries my name. One evening I found an old video of her. She must have been 6. She's in the backyard, running around in the sprinkler, laughing so hard she can barely breathe. I'm behind the camera saying something like, "Don't slip, sweetheart." She turns soaking wet and shouts, "I love you, Mommy." I watched it 3 times. The 3rd time I muted the sound. Just let her move across the screen in silence. And I realized something. She did love me. Back then. Before the world got complicated, before love became tangled up in power and distance and control. I paused the video on a frame where she's mid-jump, eyes closed, joy everywhere. Then I turned off the TV and sat there for a long time. I don't hate her. I'm not sure I ever could, but I don't love her the way I used to. Because that kind of love, unconditional, blind, bone deep, requires trust. And trust is a door she closed. I'm not standing on the porch waiting for it to open again. I'm inside now, where it's warm, where it's quiet, where I belong. Next week I'm taking a trip, Florida again, not to visit, not to chase, just to see the ocean. To sit on the sand with a book and a wide-brimmed hat and nothing to hide from. I already booked the rental, already packed my journal, and when I get there I'll walk the beach and think not of what I lost, but of what I kept. My name, my dignity, my life. And I'll let the wind carry the rest of it out to sea, because I can't carry her anymore. She was my daughter. She still is, but that's not the same as being close. And now I know the difference. I stood on the beach just after sunrise. Not a soul in sight. Just me barefoot in the cool sand, the hem of my pants damp from the tide. I held my sandals in one hand and a thermos of coffee in the other. The ocean stretched out in front of me, soft and endless, like it had nothing to prove. It reminded me of myself. That morning marked exactly 6 months since I left for Florida without telling Sophie. 6 months since I found the note taped to her door on Honeymoon. 6 months since I saw the life they built without me, around me, over me. And 6 months since I stopped chasing what didn't want to be caught. I breathed deep. The salt in the air didn't sting anymore. It cleared something. I sat on a piece of driftwood and opened my journal. The one I'd been keeping since I took my life back. The one that didn't mention Sophie every day anymore. She was in it, of course, but as a figure in the distance. Not the center, not the reason. I flipped to the last page, uncapped my pen, and wrote, "I don't forgive her." But I no longer need to. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't cold. It was just true. Because forgiveness had always felt like a toll I had to pay to move forward, but now I realized I'd already paid. In silence. In disappointment. In second chances. And I'd made it to the other side anyway. On my terms, my home still mine, my accounts protected, my memories intact, my peace unshakable. That was the legacy I was leaving behind. Not money, not guilt, not silence, but clarity. It's funny when you stop performing for people, when you stop explaining yourself to the ones who stopped listening long ago, you realize how much of your life you'd been narrating for their benefit. Now I speak for myself. And when I speak, it sounds like truth, like boundaries, like no thank you, like I don't owe you access to me, like this is where I end and you begin. A few weeks after that final call, I mailed Sophie something, just a small padded envelope. Inside was a photo. Us at the zoo, 1993. She was riding my shoulders, holding a balloon, laughing like the world was brand new. On the back I wrote, "This was my favorite version of us. I hope you find your own one day, but I won't be waiting." She never replied, and that was fine, because I didn't send it for closure. I sent it as a benediction, a clean ending, something quiet to draw a line beneath everything that had come before. I took a walk along the shoreline. The waves reached for my feet and pulled away over and over like they didn't quite know what to do with me. I didn't cry. I didn't even think of crying. Because this wasn't sadness. It was something steadier, like finally standing up straight after being hunched for too long. There are parts of me she'll never know again. Soft parts, tender ones. But there's strength in that too. In knowing what parts of you are yours alone. I think that's what real healing looks like. Not reconciliation, not forced family dinners, not pretending it never happened, just understanding the wound, cleaning it, protecting it, and letting the scar be what it is, a sign you survived. Back home, I've started locking the door again. Not out of fear, out of respect. Because what I've rebuilt is worth protecting. Every drawer that no longer hides a plan with my name on it. Every morning I wake up and don't flinch at the mailbox. Every night I sleep without wondering what part of me they'll take next. That's worth more than any inheritance, more than any forced connection. And if Sophie ever decides to come back, not to ask, not to take, but to see, I'll let her knock. But I won't be waiting by the door. I'll be in the garden, tending to what's mine, rooting what still grows. And if she finds me there, I'll listen. Not to fix, not to absorb, just to witness. And when the time comes, I'll return to my house. Alone, on my terms. Not as a mother erased, but as a woman remembered, by herself, for herself, forever.